Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do the webinar, Think Like a Hacker, Protect Your Financial Data. We are Kyber Security. We are an IT support and cybersecurity company, and we're dedicated to protecting you from cyber threats and also helping you comply with the latest cybersecurity regulatory requirements. Just a little PSA first before we begin. October is actually Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so this webinar is very timely, well planned. If you follow us on our social media platforms, we have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You'll find new updates from us all month long, and it will be some valuable cyber awareness training for you. And we also have our blog active at kybersecure.com/blog, which you can see more updates as well on there. And with further ado, I will introduce you to our president, Michael Giuffrida. He will be conducting the webinar today. Welcome, Mike. Welcome all.
Thanks, Amber. Just real quickly, I get a lot of questions about whether or not folks feel like they're in the right venue, the right webinar. And so quick little overview, a little self-check here. This webinar is right for you if, say you work in the healthcare industry, government, financial, manufacturing, non-for-profit, really any type of a vertical market that requires you to adhere to some sort of a compliance. If you store, transfer data or money through your network, through the internet, the things that we're going to talk about here could be pretty important to you. If you collect information on preferences, habits of clients, prospects, buyers, etc., and you store that information, let's say in a CRM system or something to that effect, that's going to be information you're going to want to know about. And if you have any outdated hardware or software on your network, again, that's information that we're going to talk about here today and how you can protect yourself. If you have any of these items on your network, you are a target, and this could be important to you. So the three things that we want to get out of this webinar today, the first is understand why hackers want your information. Right? Are they even coming after you? Why is this important to them? Second is how they're going to try to get the information from you. And the last part, and this is the part that a lot of people like to spend time on, is how can you stop them? Ultimately, our goal of this is to get you to think like a hacker so you don't expose your valuable, confidential, organizational information. So let's start with the first one. Why would a cyber criminal want your data? The simple answer is that your data on your network is probably easier to get at than the data that's in Citigroup or out in large organizations that have billions of dollars to spend on cybersecurity. And so while there may not be the volume of data in your organization, it's an easy way for them to make money because you have most often the least advanced defenses keeping them from their goal. And in a lot of cases, when social engineering and other types of scams come into place, an organization who has less experience with cybersecurity are more likely to let them through the front door. This is one thing that makes small, medium-sized businesses major targets. And the way they then monetize that is by hitting many small organizations at the same time so that they can gather up the booty, they can get the goods from multiple organizations, add them together, and be able to monetize it for the same amount of profit with far less effort. I think I got a little ahead, Amber. The slides are coming up a little bit slow on my end. I apologize to anybody else if they're having that same experience. We'll just let them catch up with us. So what kinds of things are hackers doing to try to get to this data? Well, what we did was we tried to look through the average small, medium-sized business network, and we hired a hacker to help us figure out how are you going to get in, what are you going to do, and then how are you going to move forward from there if you get past our first line of defense. And we went through and talked to them about all the different tactics and techniques they might use, such as finding credentials on the dark web, or looking at ports that are open in a firewall, using email phishing campaigns, hijacking email boxes. And systematically, we walked through the average SMB style network, because that's designed differently than an enterprise type network, and looked to put up multiple layers of defense in an effort to stop or deter a hacker from spending a lot of time trying to get into your network. Because at some point, the treasure you have isn't going to be individually large enough, as we talked about. They're going to move on to the easier targets. So we went through all the scenarios we could come up with and developed what is known as a defense in-depth methodology. This methodology basically puts many layers of defense in between you and a hacker, and if they get past one, the next one will try to stop them. If they get past the second one, the next one will try to stop them. And it's a combination of technology, processes, procedures, and overall reducing the attack surface that they have available to try to get at the treasure in your network. The harder it is to get in, the less attractive it is to a hacker, in simplest form. The next thing we did is that we looked at the employees. Now, often you've probably heard the phrase that the employees can be the greatest vulnerability in your network because of all the different types of scams that are on there, and the fact that employees will potentially click on things and cause issues by launching malware within a network. And so the big recommendation that we have as far as this goes is having a comprehensive employee awareness training program and making cybersecurity part of your company culture. If you do this, you can turn your greatest potential vulnerability into your greatest defense by making them aware of the types of things they might see that would cause problems and shutting them down, avoiding them, reporting them, and keeping their eyes out to make sure that your treasure is secure and protected. So that's step one in this, is understanding why they would want to come after you at all. For a long time, small and medium-sized organizations, were able to say, well, they're not after me, there's no reason. It turns out that small, medium-sized businesses are the most attacked type of business, yielding, I think the latest stat I saw was over 60% of the cyber attacks were against small and medium-sized businesses. So your information is at risk. You are a target. The next thing we want to talk about is what an attacker is going to try to do to get that information out of your network. So I like to start this section by telling a story. And this is a story of an organization that we met with several years ago. Amber, have you changed the slide? Okay. Sorry, they just weren't updating on my side. Thank you. This is an organization we met with a few years back. It happened to be in the not-for-profit sector. We talked about all the things that we could do for them, and the pat answer is, oh, that's more than we're spending today for standard IT support. We don't have the budget to go any further. There's no way we could possibly make this step forward. And so they went and hired a traditional support provider, which again, it's not uncommon. That happens. Sometimes people don't recognize what it takes to properly protect their organization. Unfortunately, in this case, 9 months later, they were a victim of a ransomware breach. We tried to help them understand that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but in this particular case, it didn't pay off for them. So during the course of the breach, their systems, some of their systems were down for over a month. They lost data. They were legally obligated to report the breach to the Attorney General. They lost funding opportunities. They had to pay their managed service provider quite a bit of money to recover their systems. And I don't know if you can see my air quotes there, but we'll talk a little bit about how recovered they were when we stepped in. And it looked, as they started to recover, that their backups were incomplete, partially corrupted, and ultimately, the recovery was partial at best from a data standpoint. And at that point, you might say, okay, well, but they're back up and running, and so, life is good, and they're going to continue moving forward. But they reached out to us and said, hey, we know we talked to you a while back. We knew we couldn't afford or we didn't think we could afford to work with you at that point, but we think it's time. There's no way we want to go through this again. So we got into their network and immediately found that their clean network was still very infected. Well, they didn't have ransomware messages up on their screens anymore, and their data was not encrypted, or for the most part not encrypted anymore. There was still active data being exfiltrated out of their network to a foreign country by the threat actors who got into their network. So they essentially, while they recovered the systems, the threat actors just kept taking data because nobody had stopped them from doing that. We worked pretty hard to try to stop the exfiltration, and every time we'd close up a hole, they'd open up another hole. It was a pretty serious game of whack-a-mole for a little while, until what we determined had to be done was that the network had to be rebuilt from scratch. Implement the new security controls, scrub and disinfect all the data. Ultimately, this was hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense that this organization had to invest, and sad for a non-for-profit organization who's, fighting the good fight. They have a great cause and their money's going to this as opposed to delivering their services and delivering their programs. The saying we like to use with regard to this is, once breached, always breached. Once a hacker gets into the root level of your network, it's very, very difficult to get them out without rebuilding the network from scratch, because there are a lot of techniques they can use to try to hide in the bushes, so to speak, and avoid cleanups and controls, because they're already administrators of the network. They're already able to bypass because of the types of credential they've given themselves. And so if any of you have ever experienced a breach, you might be suspect of whether or not there's, again, active exfiltration going on in your network currently. If you were ever the victim of a ransomware attack and paid the ransom or got, recovered from your backup, if you thankfully had good backups, still worthwhile trying to make sure that the network is clean and there's not active breach activity still happening within the network. So what are they doing in trying to get this data? This slide outlines the top 3 cyber threats that have been identified in 2020. These numbers change obviously by the minute, but as of the writing of this slide, which was a couple of weeks ago probably, business email compromise, huge expenditure for organizations, confidence fraud, and I just gave you the example of ransomware. We're going to talk about each one of these in a little bit of detail. You've probably seen or heard of some of the techniques in each of these, and maybe even experienced them throughout your organization. I know we have. So let's first talk about business email compromise. This is a fast rising threat for small and medium-sized organizations today. And the juxt of what's happening here is that a threat actor will identify a player in an organization, usually somebody who has access to the money, a controller, a payables person, someone who is responsible for client collections or receiving wire transfers, etc. And they will find ways to either socially engineer or get a hold of credentials to be able to break into this person's mailbox. And what they do is once they're in your mailbox, they create a forwarding rule so that all email that comes to you gets forwarded directly to them. And now they sit and wait. And they see all the regular, mundane, noisy emails that happen every day, and they ignore all of those. And then they see the one from the client that says, I'm ready to do my transfer to purchase those goods. What account would you like the money sent into? And what they do is insert themselves into the conversation and take your employee off of the conversation. So now they are directing all of the conversation through themselves to get that money transferred into a location that's good for them. They will immediately move that money again, and maybe a third or fourth time, which will create a very difficult trail to be unwound to be able to recover the money. And you may be none the wiser for quite some time because you just think somebody didn't get back to you or somebody didn't respond to an email. And it could be, a few days or a few weeks that this whole process could go over, and they're intercepting the important email going on in the organization. You would be none the wiser unless you were monitoring your email box for something like a forwarding rule that was created without your knowledge. This one is huge on the rise. We've seen it at prospects and clients, right here locally. This is not something that happens, in the news or to somebody else. This happens every day. And again, the recovery of the money is very difficult. And even if you have cyber insurance, the time for the investigation and the potential for recovery based upon what you may have had in place for controls is questionable based upon how your insurance policy was written. So unfortunately, in some of these cases, the cyber insurance is not a catch-all that's going to solve the problem at the end, even if you do wind up getting taken for this type of a compromise. The next type of compromise that I'd like to talk about is called confidence fraud. And I actually have an interesting story because in our organization, there was an attempt at this just last week. Confidence fraud is a situation where someone tries to create trust with one of your employees based upon their position or a perceived position, so that an employee will do something that they shouldn't otherwise have done. May seem harmless at the time, although ultimately is harmful to the company. They'll do things to apply pressure, make it a hurry up situation, make it time sensitive so that someone might not think it through. They might just do whatever was asked. So in our organization, last week, all of my employees got an email which supposedly came from me. And the email address was not mine. It was some bogus email address, but the email said, "Hey, I need some help with something quietly. Could you please do me a favor?" And of course, immediately, several employees sent me at my real address the message and said, "Hey, Mike, what's this all about?" Quickly realized it wasn't me, and it wasn't a request for me. However, what they were trying to do was to get a conversation started that would allow our email filters to look like that was a real email address, and then be able to ask for requests such as buying gift cards or something to that effect. Luckily, again, in our case, that didn't happen, but it has happened to many organizations. The CEO say, "Hey, I need you to buy me these gift cards for a bunch of attendees in a meeting. It's very important, and I just send me the codes, and then I'll take care of everything else." Unfortunately, those are usually fraud situations, and those gift cards are not not for a valid company use. Another common one there is tech support fraud. So one of your employees might get a a call and from someone saying that they are your tech support provider. And they'll say, hey, I see a ping here that says there's a problem with your computer, and if you'll just let me get on, I'll get it fixed real quick for you. This will just take a minute. And so the person will let them on the computer because they don't verify that it's actually the tech support provider, and the hacker will go in, put malware on the machine, and then maybe they'll do screenshots or screen capture to get a hold of passwords. They'll do key logging, and then break into other systems from there. And then phishing, there's examples of that in both of these, but you've all seen the phishing emails where they're trying to get you to click on something that is not valid, and the malicious code then gets launched on your computer. The next type of fraud we want to talk about is ransomware. So I just gave an example of a ransomware attack where the network was compromised, all machines were locked up and encrypted. This is very, very common, has been around for quite some time. As it turns out now, a new ransomware attack occurs every 14 seconds by the latest study, and it looks like by 2021 it'll be every 11 seconds. The real kicker to all of this is that even if you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee that that your data will be unlocked and returned, or that it won't be sold, or that the attacker is not going to stay in your network and continue to cause you harm. So again, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure in these situations, because having anyone on your network for any malicious activity just causes long-term challenges. So a few top vulnerabilities that folks have seen in networks currently in 2020. First and biggest is out-of-date technology. Many of you, I'm sure, heard that last January, Windows 7 and Server 2008 went out of support, which means that every new security vulnerability that's introduced into the technology will not be closed up by Windows. So Microsoft is not going to be fixing that software any longer, which means that once the attackers know about the problem, all they need to do is get in to be able to take advantage of it. If you have any of that technology in your organization still, you need to make sure that that's locked off or removed immediately. The second top vulnerability is untrained and uninformed employees. This is what we've been talking about, email-based scams, allowing someone on your computer based upon a confidence scam, the gift card scams. It's really, really easy for a threat actor to launch these and launch them in volume, cost them almost nothing. And frankly, they can go, even a amateur hacker can go purchase the service that will deliver the email and the malware. So all they have to do is open up their portal and get into your network after the email campaign's done its job. So really simple, really low hanging fruit for these guys if your folks aren't trained. And the last one here we're going to talk about is a little less talked about in the day-to-day world. However, you've probably heard about some of the examples, and this is supply chain as a weak link. So the big example that a lot of people have heard about and talk about is with Target. Target was breached because a third-party vendor wound up being the entry point into the Target network, which caused hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage to their organization and their reputation. This type of vulnerability, though, is not limited to large organizations like Target. You have third parties that either have access to your network or get access to your network or can get access to your network Sometimes it's the copier technology. Sometimes it's some sort of a monitoring technology. All of this is on the network these days. Might even be your thermostat that is measuring the temperature of your data room and reporting that back, over the internet somehow. Any of these supply chain or third parties could be weak links into your network, and it's good practice for you to vet them and make sure that they're taking proper steps to protect their networks, which will protect your network in turn. So we've talked a little bit about why hackers want your information, how they're going to try to get it. The last step, and maybe the one that you want to hear most about, is what you can do to try to stop them. So let's jump into that. This is where we use the phrase thinking like a hacker. We want you to engage in regular cybersecurity awareness training. What does that mean? It doesn't mean do the thing once or once a year, or have them, when you think about it, maybe do some sort of training. It means engaging in a comprehensive cybersecurity awareness program for your employees that helps make it part of the culture in your organization. Make sure that you're training them different ways, different times of the year. You're testing them with phishing campaigns and seeing if they're paying attention when you're training them, and giving additional coaching and training to those people who do still fall victim to some of the testing that happens out there. Fact is, many compliances and regulations require cybersecurity training anyway. HIPAA, PCI, SOX, GDPR, sometimes even from your insurance requirements. If you have cybersecurity insurance, they're recommending or requiring that you do awareness training for your employees as part of your diligence to make sure that you are protecting the network. 63% of the data breaches that happen today are due to employee negligence. And, Amber mentioned Cybersecurity Awareness Month at the beginning of this. October is a great time to start getting your folks thinking like hackers, having them understand what the challenges are out there and how they can help be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. The second step that we believe is pretty important is following a framework for implementing security controls into your organization. Why do we recommend this? We recommend this because there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of stuff out there, and there's a lot of people trying to sell the next best thing. Believe me, I get calls every day from new technology providers, from new security providers who want us to partner with them, who want us to evaluate their tools. There's a ton of them out there. And for any particular purpose, many of those tools would be appropriate. But the key to using a framework is it gives you a methodical way to go through what's going on in your organization. What do you have to protect? How are you going to protect it? How are you going to see if there's problems? How are you going to respond if there is a problem? And how are you going to recover from that so that your business continues to operate? Now, we have aligned with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a government agency. And this particular framework is a set of best practices. You can't become compliant with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or get certified, but it's a set of best practices that allows you to look at what they're recommending and then how it applies to your business so that you can see, okay, what's the most critical holes and how do I fix those? How do I get the low-hanging fruit? How do I put some barriers up that are going to deflect threat actors so that they'll leave my business alone and spend their time somewhere else? The other thing that a framework also helps with is it provides a common language to help communicate cybersecurity risk to stakeholders in the organization. Maybe you report to a senior management team. Maybe you report to a board. Maybe there's a budget committee that needs to decide where the money is going to go. A framework like the NIST framework gives you that common language to talk in risk terms as they relate to the business, not just in technical terms, because oftentimes it's hard to bring that back to reality to understand how these priorities rate in relation to the other priorities that you have for your financial resources. The third thing we recommend is having a plan. So in line with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and Cybersecurity Awareness Month coming up, we're actually offering a free complimentary gap analysis for your organizations, for anybody who attended the webinar today. This is not normally a free product, but this is something that we believe is really able to help you make the best informed decisions on what things are the most critical and need to be done for your organization. Whether you do this analysis yourself, do it with somebody else, or do it with us, you should do it, because this is going to help you understand what are the big priorities that we need to focus on to make sure that we're secure. If anybody is interested in that, please either put something in the chat or reach out to Amber, and she will get you set up for that. And if you have a plan and you start working through that plan, you can avoid being an example like the one I talked about earlier. The fact of the matter is, there is no 100% guarantee that you're not going to get breached. However, the more difficult you make it, the less chance there is of it happening. And it's much nicer to be in a place of proactive and planned than reactive and freaked out. Some additional items that I'd like to talk about, which are things that you can do today. I get a question all the time. If there's only one thing I could do, what would it be? My answer is always enforce multi-factor authentication everywhere you can in your organization. Whether it's on your logins to your computers, your logins to your emails, your logins to Facebook, I don't care. Anywhere that allows multi-factor authentication, enable it. If you're not familiar, multi-factor authentication is a system that allows you to be validated that you are who you are using something you know, which is your password, and something you have. In most cases, or in a lot of cases currently, that would be like your cell phone. So if you would have a little app on your cell phone, and then when you try to log in, it buzzes your cell phone and either gives you a code to type in or allows you to accept the authentication, knowing that there's two factors that are validating you are who you say you are. Anywhere you can do it, turn it on. I don't care if it's your personal Gmail. Anywhere you can do it, turn it on. Can't emphasize that enough. Second thing is check the dark web to see if you have any exposed data that's out there today. The dark web is that dirty, nasty place where hackers like to go hang out, and they can buy almost anything on the dark web. If it's illegal, it's probably available. But one of the most common things we see which causes harm to organizations is credentials that get sold out there that were harvested from different breaches. So for example, when LinkedIn was breached, if you were using your company email address on LinkedIn, so it was you@you.com, and that happens to also be your login for your domain in your business, well, you.com is now available as a search on the dark web, and people are a threat actor will look for information out there and associated passwords. Let's say your LinkedIn password was similar to the password that you use to log into your network, because nobody wants to have to remember a whole bunch of different passwords, right? So now they've got that information, and they can try to break into your email box, break into your network. Again, if you're not using multi-factor authentication, you make it really easy for them. So you can have a scan done on the dark web. There's a million free services that do it out there for you. Amber, I think we'll even do this for the folks who attended today. If they're interested, we can run a quick scan for you and see if there's anything out there with passwords associated, so that you should be changing those passwords immediately. The third thing here is monitoring your email boxes for identifiers of compromise. This is what I was talking about earlier with the business email compromise scams, where people are taking over your network, taking over your email box and forwarding your email and reading it all, and then getting involved when the conversation gets juicy. There are many different services that allow you to monitor your email boxes. They're not very expensive on a per mailbox basis. If you're using Office 365 or G Suite, you can get this for several dollars per mailbox. It's not like $100 per mailbox. And if you start monitoring this, it will look for things like forwarding rules is one of the things we talked about. They'll look for things such as mass downloads of email. So if somebody breaks into your email box, they may try to download everything first so they can scrub it to find any passwords you might have stored in there. It looks for unusual login activities. So let's say you log in from Connecticut, but then you log in from Italy 2 hours later. Probably not likely unless you brought your DeLorean for time travel. So things that would be indicators of compromise on that mailbox will throw up an alert, and you will immediately be notified so that you can lock down that mailbox, change the passwords, make sure there's no forwarding rules, get rid of those things, etc. And the last thing you can do today, again, engage in cybersecurity awareness training, regardless of how you do it. There are free programs out there. There are tons of resources on the web. If you care to just download and implement those types of things yourself. Again, of course, we offer this type of stuff. We offer all of this. It's part of what we're doing here, is trying to educate and help organizations out. But do it intentionally. Don't do it to check the box. If you're going to get involved in cybersecurity awareness training, do it intentionally. And a great way that we think to kick that off, again, in honor of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, in October, is attending an event we have going on called Crack the Hack. This is an interactive cybersecurity awareness program. It's a week-long event. It's an hour a day plus some activities that happen in between. But it's sort of the game Clue meets an escape room, and it's a interesting way for folks to learn about the types of things that will cause an organization harm. And the hope is that by doing it in a different format, it will stick a little bit more and help it become part of the culture of your organizations. So just to check in here, we went through why hackers would want your information, what they're going to do to try to get it, types of things you can try to stop them, including some really actionable things that you can do today, many of which you could do at low to no cost for your organization. At this point, it's really time for you to start thinking like a hacker yourself and protecting what you have out there. Amber, I'm not sure if you've set this up with a Q&A possibility, but if people do have questions, we have a few minutes left. You can put them into the chat box, and Amber can read them out, and I'll address them as appropriate.
And other than that, thanks for coming, guys. Do you have any words of wisdom to end with, Mike?
Just one last thing on Crack the Hack. It is a free event, so there is no cost for you to be able to attend that event. And there will be, Amber's got all kinds of games and prizes and things set up throughout it, so it should be a lot of fun. I hope to see you all there.
Nice. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Good day.